I've tried 1/3 of the performance-enhancing drugs which are out there. And again, it's not a challenge, guys. I'm not challenging you guys to go up to 100% because this list is very, very extensive and not all these compounds have practical application in bodybuilding. Welcome to Vigorous PEDs. I'm Coach Steve. I thought it would be a fun idea to go over the World Anti-Doping Agency International Standard Prohibited list of 2021 and see how prohibited Coach Steve actually is. Because over the last 20 years of my bodybuilding career, I've experimented with many different compounds. Some of them are on the prohibited list and many of them aren't because apparently they're not considered to be a performance-enhancing drug. But I can tell you from first-hand experience, they're most definitely performance-enhancing or at least enhancing for bodybuilding purposes. So there's about 395 entries on this prohibited list, and I want to determine a percentage of the total amount of compounds and see, again, determine in a percentage how prohibited Coach Steve is after 20 years of bodybuilding. Now, to be clear, I was drug-free for 11 years and enhanced for 10 years. So I'm still enhanced now, even though I'm off all the anabolic androgenic steroids. I'm still using liraglutide, which is a glucagon-like peptide 1 receptor agonist, growth hormone, clenbuterol, GW1516, SR9009, and ribulsine, and modafinil, which is also on the list, but ribulsine is not on this list, even though I consider it to be a performance-enhancing drug. So, without further ado, let's go over the list and see, how far we get into this crossword puzzle, because that's basically what it is. And you could consider it a resume of my experience with several performance-enhancing drugs. Now, page 1 is very clear, prohibited list of 2021. Second page, table of content. Then we get into a little bit of a preface, non-approved substances. So let's just move on to S1. The anabolic agents. Now, as you see, I already highlighted a couple of the compounds that I've taken in the past with a red border, so you can easily see which one I've taken and which ones I haven't taken. Now, some of them are metabolites, like mestanolone, for example. That's a metabolite of oxymetholone or anadrol. So even though I didn't take mestanolone directly, by taking oxymetholone orally, you automatically get its metabolite, mestanolone. So I highlighted that as well. And some of the metabolites from boldenone I also highlighted, the androstenediones and the androstenediols. So those you all get automatically when you take boldenone. But I highlighted that because they were definitely present within my body in the few cycles of boldenone that I did in the past. Now, 7-keto DHEA is mentioned on the anabolic agents, but I believe dihydroepiandrosterone, DHEA, was present on the anabolic agents list in the past, but I didn't see it on this 2021 edition. So maybe they took it off or they moved it somewhere else. I'm not really sure. I can't remember, which ones, because I've experimented with a significant amount of compounds. But if it's no longer present on the 2021 prohibited list, then I will just give myself an extra point because DHEA is certainly a PED because it converts into testosterone and estrogen and both have anabolic benefits. Now, drostanolone is masterone. I'm sure most of you guys know that. When you take ACG, FH, or LH in an attempt to restore your HPTA or you take it on cycle to keep your testicular function going, you get a little bit of epiandrosterone, epidihydrotestosterone, and epitestosterone, because they're all produced in various ratios within normal HPTA function. Fluoxymestrolone is halotestin, and again, the mestanolone is a metabolite of oxymetholone, and you basically get that for free. Let's move on to the next page of the anabolic agents. Mestrolone, also known as Proviron, methendianone, also known as Dianabol. It has many different names, but methendione is the one that they mentioned here, Dianabol. And then my favorite, metanolone, which is Primobolan. Mibolerone is also known as check drops. That was a very short experiment of several days. And then I spaced it out to pre-workout only on my leg day because you would feel sick after 2 days of administration because it's very liver toxic. And after the 50 tablets were finished, of check drops, I never took it again. Nandrolone, I have, a couple cycles under my belt with Nandrolone only, and I added it to some of the cycles in the past and no longer take it. I have no interest in taking Nandrolone anymore, but I do have interest in taking Oxandrolone, Anavar, Oxymetholone, Anadrol. Also would like to run that in the future. Stanozolol, Winstrol, testosterone. The name says enough by itself. And Trembolone, also known as Parabolan, but mostly as Trembolone because Parabolan is Trembolone, Hexo, Cyclobenzyl, I don't know, the longest ester you've ever seen ever. And most guys would prefer Trembolone acetate or Trembolone enanthate. I prefer neither of those. I will never run Trembolone again. And lastly on this list of anabolic agents is clenbuterol and some of the SARMs. Now, they don't mention Osterine here specifically, or is that the LGD-4033? I'm not even sure. I know LGD has several different forms, and maybe Osterine is one of them. Again, I don't really dig into the SARMs because unlike the name insinuates, selective androgen receptor modulators, they're anything but selective, and they should just be called ARMs. Clenbuterol is considered an anabolic agent because it stimulates the central nervous system and acts on the beta-2 adrenergic receptors. So it helps with contractile capacity of skeletal muscle. And it's exactly why I'm running it right now. Even though I'm not exactly training, I'm still performing my cardio on a daily basis. And I would like to get some of that sweet fat loss that clenbuterol induces. Let's go over to S2, the peptide hormones, growth factors, and related substances and mimetics. Now, I haven't experimented with EPO or erythropoietin mimetics, and neither of the ones that are classified in one erythropoietic compounds, but I have experimented aplenty with peptide hormones and their releasing factors. Now, unfortunately, they don't list them all specifically, so I can only highlight two of the three, that being the chorionic gonadotropins, the luteinizing hormones, the follicle stimulating hormones, the triptorelins, etc., and the growth hormones and growth hormone releasing peptides like GHRP6 or anti-obesity drugs, which I haven't experimented with. I would like to do that in the future. I've taken human growth hormone fragment, 176-191. I've tried several growth hormone releasing peptides, whether that's GHRP2, GHRP6, hexamerlin, sermerlin, etc. So I'm just going to highlight one, but I've experimented with many of these compounds, which are classified in the peptide hormones category of the World Anti-Doping Agency prohibited list. Moving on to page 2 of the peptide hormones, insulin-like growth factor 1. Highly guilty. I've experimented with IGF-1 LR3, IGF-1 DES, and even one administration of Increlex, when a friend of mine was very generous to give me 25 micrograms of Increlex preloaded in an insulin syringe. And that was probably the best pump I've ever experienced, doing that bilaterally, half the syringe of 12.5 micrograms of Increlex in each chest muscle. So, yeah, I'm not going to give you a demonstration. You'll just have to use your imagination, but it was certainly a better pump than a full vial of IGF-1 LR3 in each pack. Fortunately, Increlex is a little bit difficult to source. Thymosin beta-4 and its derivatives, so whether that's BPC-157, which is probably categorized in the same class of compounds of these peptide hormones, as you see down below, that they mention, other growth factors or growth factor modulators are also not approved on the prohibited list. But the funny thing about these prohibited lists is they don't always mention all the compounds that are not approved, but they will make sure that you fail for everything. Again, so of note, the glucagon-like peptide 1 receptor agonists, the liraglutides, the semaglutides, and the dulaglutides are not on this list, which, are somewhat performance enhancing by keeping your appetite suppressed, allowing you to focus on your diet a little bit better when you're in a caloric deficit, but they're not mentioned here. They're not mentioned anywhere on this list, but I will give myself 2 out of 5 for the GLP-1 receptor agonist, that being the liraglutide and the dulaglutide. Moving on to S3, the beta-2 receptor agonists. I've tried salbutamol and clenbuterol, even though clenbuterol is labeled as an anabolic agent. Now, with salbutamol, they still allow it up to a certain dose. And I think the maximum dose here they mention is 800 micrograms over 12 hours or 1600 micrograms over 24 hours. But the maximum I've ever done of salbutamol is 400 micrograms pre-workout to open up the bronchial tubes and help with a heavy leg day. And I can tell you, when I was running Trenbolone, I would take like 2-3 puffs, which is 200 to 300 micrograms of salbutamol before each workout, just to help with, vasodilation in the lungs and allow me to get more air. And whether that's the Trenbolone itself or the inflammatory prostaglandins, which are released with continuous Trenbolone use, salbutamol is able to mitigate some of these effects. But honestly, guys, I prefer to take Trenbolone out and enjoy a deep, long, fresh breath of air, without the use of salbutamol. Let's move on to S4, hormone and metabolic modulators. Of the aromatase inhibitors, I've tried anastrozole, Arimidex, exemestane, aromasin, and letrozole, Femara. Now, I've also highlighted the 2 metabolites of boldenone, the Androsta 146 and 35 variants, that being the arimistane. I've tried that. And at one point, I had the opportunity to try testanolactone, but I didn't notice a difference in my serum estradiol concentration. So I don't think that was real. It's been pulled off the market for several years, as far as I know. So I don't think that testanolactone that I tried in the past was real. So I didn't highlight that, just to be 100% transparent with you guys and honest. Of the anti-estrogenic compounds, I've tried clomiphene, tamoxifen, and tormophene, as well as enclomiphene, which is not mentioned on this list. I didn't have an opportunity to try roloxifene yet, but I will do so in the future to see if it's really true, if roloxifene can reverse preformed gynecomastia. So I will do that in the future, but so far I haven't tried it yet. That's why it's not highlighted. Of the second page, I've tried the metabolic modulators, being injectable AM or ATP, which is not exactly mentioned in detail, but I consider that part of this panel on the doping list. So I've tried injectable ATP and modulators of the AMP activated protein kinase, whether that's the ICAR, the SR9009, the peroxisome proliferator activated receptor delta agonist, the GW1516, or GW1516, or cardarine, or endurable. Do I get 4 points for trying the same thing? No, right? You just get 1 point for cardarine. All right, anyway. Insulin and insulin mimetics. Now, they don't mention the dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors, which is basically an insulin mimetic by inhibiting the breakdown of insulin and other growth factors. It's not mentioned specifically, but I have tried it, so I have to give myself a couple points for that as well. Good job on Steve, trying compounds that are not on the doping list. I've tried meldonium. Can't really say it was effective, but I've tried it. Let's move on to S5, the diuretics and masking agents. Desmopressin I've tried recently, which is basically prescribed in cases of people that have to urinate frequently, so it inhibits kidney function. I've tried that in the past. I've tried plasma expanders, which is basically injectable albumin, which you do the IV drip, which you need to take concurrently with diuretics because it's pulling fluids from the extracellular space. So plasma expanders plus diuretics, that's how you get pretty nasty dry. You wouldn't take desmopressin in the same time because now you're defeating the purpose. Again, then all this fluid will retain in the bloodstream and serum concentrations of everything will go down to the point you probably faint. Don't do that, guys. Don't be stupid. Let's see, on the other list, spironolactone I've tried, thiazides I've tried, chlorothiazides, hydrochlorothiazides, triamterene. Man, the list is extensive. Furosemide, obviously, whether that's injectable or oral, I've tried both. And there's a note down there about tampering with samples and using. That's on the next page, right? Yeah, that's the next page. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. There's a note here of in competition detection of like ephedrines or pseudoephedrines in conjunction with salbutamol or diuretics as part of, masking. And yes, I've experimented with all of that to help some of my athletes beat the doping test. It's on the list. It doesn't mean that it's detectable. And then we go on to the M2 chemical and physical manipulations. No comment. Let's move on to S6 stimulants. Some of them stem from my younger years when I used to party here and there. So the amphetamines, the cocaines, that was all in the past. Let's see, the next page I think is MDMA. And that's something from like decades ago. So not anything I did currently, but it's on the list. And I did take it in the past, so I have to highlight it. Modafinil, yes please. Currently on modafinil. I tried phentermine in the past and phendimetrazine, which you feel horrible. It's just like sibutramine, which is on the next page. Horrible compounds. I really didn't enjoy taking those. I would prefer modafinil to get my appetite under control and make my day productive. I've tried ephedrine. I've had epinephrine injections around the time I had to do surgery, so it was not by choice, but it was required. I've tried heptaminol as part of a injectable ATP formulation, and this one is a little bit hard to pronounce, so if I mispronounce it again, I'm just going to move on and call it MDMA. Methyl N-deoxymethamphetamine. I think I got it correctly this time. It's MDMA. Now, they don't say MDMA and the variants, but I've tried DMA or was it MDA or whatever variant, or DXM, which is found in cough syrup. Again, guys, please don't judge me. When I was young and parents were going through a divorce and I was hanging out with older people, there was some experimentation with recreational drugs. Probably fried my brain in the process, but I did enjoy myself. When I underwent surgery for my broken leg, I was administered narcotics, being morphine and oxycodone post-surgery. Not by choice, but by necessity, because, surgery is quite painful. But I haven't experimented with narcotics for recreational purposes. I have experimented for recreational purposes with cannabinoids. And this is probably the only entry where I did 100% of the entries. I'm not exactly proud of it, but I did enjoy myself. So, hey, it is what it is. Glucocorticoids, I've tried by necessity as well, because, at certain points in my life when I was younger, I had heat rash or eczema. So I think I've had to use cortisone, hydrocortisone, prednisone, and maybe a couple other ones, but I can't exactly remember which medications or topical glucocorticoids I had to use in the past. And then on the last page are the beta blockers, of which I've only tried Nebivolol. I'm actually on 2.5 milligrams of Nebivolol right now because it helps to keep me calm and leveled and keep my heart rate under control for the rest of the day. So I do my fasted cardio first, take a serving of clenbuterol, and then I take my Nebivolol afterwards so I can focus on work, because I do feel that it helps to keep me productive, even though it's a beta blocker. But considering that it's very popular in archery, billiards, darts, golf, or anything else with hand-eye coordination, some of these beta blockers are being used. And, in some cases, it's only prohibited in competition, but I'm not in competition right now. I'm just recording for my YouTube channel on 2.5 milligrams Nebivolol. So I highlighted all the compounds that I think I took in the past in the index. There's 4 pages of index in the prohibited list. So you guys can see an overview of all the compounds that are in the prohibited list and which one I've taken in the past. I'm sure I forgot a few of them, so don't fault me for it. And there's plenty of compounds which are not on this list. So let's just briefly scroll through the list and the highlighted compounds, and then discuss some of the compounds which I consider performance-enhancing drugs that are not on the World Anti-Doping Agency prohibited list of 2021. And a middle note, so I don't forget any of them. The dopamine receptor agonists, cabergoline, pramipixole, and bromocriptine I've tried, aren't on the list. Melanotan-2 and PT141 are not on the list. T4 and T3 are not on the list. Some of the pre-workouts like 1,3-DMAA and DMAE or DMEA are not on this list, which give you tremendous performance-enhancing benefits. just like tadalafil, sildenafil, or vardenafil. The PDE5 inhibitors also give you a performance boost. DMP is not in this list. Tremendous for fat loss. It should be the first, it's probably the worst compound you can take. I've experimented with it in the past. It's not on this list, but yeah, unfortunately, I'll have to give myself another point for the DNP experiments. Liraglutide, dulaglutide, semaglutide, the glucagon-like peptide 1 receptor agonists are also not on the list. Yohimbine, ribulsine, not on the list. The alpha-2 adrenergic antagonists are not on the list. Dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors, there's like 30 of them. I experimented with 3 of them. So that's, 10% of the DTP4 inhibitors that I've tried. And out of the 400 entries, let's add 50 entries that are not on this list, which I consider performance enhancing. Of the 400 on the list, I've tried 100, so that's 25%. But let's add 50 compounds, which I consider to be performance enhancing drugs. Of the 50, I've tried maybe, let's say 25 of them. So I think I end up around 30% of all the performance enhancing drugs, which you can separate into different entries. So let's say I've tried 30, maybe generous 35%. Let's just cap it off at 33%. 1/3. I've tried 1/3 of the performance enhancing drugs, which are out there. And again, it's not a challenge, guys. I'm not challenging you guys to go up to 100% because this list is very, very extensive and not all these compounds have practical application in bodybuilding. I've certainly experimented with many of them, which have no merit in bodybuilding, just like cocaine or amphetamines or MDMA. Those are recreational drugs, but they are mentioned on the prohibited list. And again, it's been decades since I've experimented with those. And many of, like heptaminol, okay, it's beneficial, but I prefer to take the injectable ATP without it. And just, make sure that I don't get too much vasodilation from a high dose of ATP and forego some of the other compounds that contribute to vasodilation, like nebivolol, like telmisartan. Again, the ARBs are not on this list either. I consider them to be, they have a mild performance-enhancing drug benefit as well. Like telmisartan also has PD properties, like nebivolol has as well. So again, guys, it's not a challenge. Apparently, I'm, let's say 25 to 33% prohibited based on the World Anti-Doping Agency prohibited list of 2021 with a little bit of additions by yours truly. Feel free to go through this list. Maybe you get inspired to, get some ideas on the PEDs that are warranted in bodybuilding. Again, ubiquinol is not on this list, but I know many an athlete that are running pretty high dosages of ubiquinol after I mentioned it over the last couple of years, and they noticed tremendous performance-enhancing boost also. I hope you found this informative in any way, shape, or form. If you did, consider subscribing if you're not subscribed yet, and if you're subscribed, you are part of the awesome Vigorous crew. You guys know what to do. If you're looking for the most comprehensive guides to bodybuilding pharmacology, you can find those ebooks on my website, VigorousSteve.com/shop. If you're looking for personalized advice, you can find the rates to my services in the services section and contact me directly if you're interested in one of those services. Follow me on Instagram at VigorousSteve. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.